Okay. Well, good morning. I'm Julie Torgerson. I'm the room host, and I'm here to provide support for this presentation. I have to make one important announcement. Chat is open, but please do not send unsolicited links or contact information to individual participants. Throughout the presentation, we will ask you to keep your microphones muted. And please be aware that this presentation will be recorded and possibly shared online. You may turn off your camera if you do not wish to appear in the video. Also be aware that your name is shown in the participant screen, which could appear in the video. So please rename yourself now if you wish. And if you have questions during the presentation, please enter them in the meeting chat area so the presenter can answer them. And let's see, is that it? Yeah. So let me, welcome and thank you for joining us today at JALT International 2021. Please welcome Dr. Tamara Swenson and Brad and Marcel, that's how they wanted to be introduced, for their presentation, Generic versus Explicit Grammatical Feedback for Moodle Quiz Items. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share the screen now of our presentation here. There's one more person who could not be here today. That's Shinya Iwasaki. He has a class right now. And this idea came to us a couple years ago for doing this. It started because of, I've been using Moodle, and I noticed that there were ways to give feedback on individual question items in there. And when I looked around, I never really saw much of that being used at all. I've never heard of anybody actually using it for anything except for simple feedback like good job or try harder or something like that. And so I was interested in trying to work up something on that. And we came up with this project to check whether explicit feedback in Moodle for items, grammatical items would result in better gain scores than generic feedback. That's where we began with there. The flow of this presentation, we're going to talk at first about the importance of feedback in L2 learning, probably something that everyone already knows. I've already mentioned the underuse of the feedback function in Moodle question development, and I know that many people are not familiar with Moodle to begin with, but there's an underuse of that. And then we'll discuss the results of our study, how we set it up and what we found. And then after that, we'll address some of the obstacles to using feedback function in Moodle. Okay, and now Dr. Swenson will explain a little bit about the role of feedback in language learning.
We've had long had an awareness of the importance of feedback in language education. And what the basic rule is, feedback is good. We should be providing appropriate feedback when there is an error in learners' output, and that all feedback has the goal of getting students to become self-learners and regulating their learner behavior. Next slide, please. What we've been what I was digging into is whether there has been any feedback, research on feedback in use of technology for anything beyond writing. And most of the research in the use of technology has looked at how technology can help with writing and how feedback can aid student writers. What I haven't been finding is research on the use of the feedback functions within the various LMS systems, including the Moodle LMS. But all of the research that I did find is that feedback is important, that corrective feedback adds to learners' understanding, and that this leads to learning. All this suggests that feedback options in the LMS that schools are using, that teachers are using for their classes, should be used if they're available. Next slide, please. And so the Moodle LMS, just a little bit of background, it's one of the most used LMS systems at Japanese universities. It's open source, makes it very amenable to variations in university decisions on how they're going to use it. It's also been rated one of the best, well, the best learning platform by an independent organization called Learning Platforms. And more importantly, I think from my perspective, is that it provides controls that are missing from Google Classroom, including assignment cutoff dates and the development of random generation of items and question banks that can be shared between classes or used across years. Next slide.
Okay, and Tada Sensei will explain about the study that we did.
Okay. Just remind you, the purpose of the study is to compare if explicit or formative feedback is better than the generic feedback, both in the Moodle format. And the first, we set the hypothesis that the student taking quizzes in Moodle who receive formative feedback or instructive feedback but incorrect answers will outperform students who receive generic feedback. And materials, okay, I'm talking about the method section now. The materials consist of an item pool of 240 items. There are 2 option multiple choice questions targeting knowledge of the grammar points of the present participles, past participles. They are both attributive and predicative, and also they are passive forms. Okay, next slide, please. And now about the participants. The participants were drawn from 2 institutions. They are both voluntary groups. And at the Site 1 University, the students were the first year to third year students. And at the Site 2, all first year students were invited, and they are invited by the grammar course teachers. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now talking about the design of the study. Okay, this is a pre-test, post-test design with the treatment in between 2 tests. And the intervention is done using the practice test. And pre-test is composed of the 40-item test, grammar test. And based on the results of the pre-test, the groups of the participants are divided into 2 groups, control group and treatment group. Okay, and the 40-item practice tests were used as treatments and consist of the same proportions of the items from each group as in the pre-test, but items are drawn randomly from the item test bank. As Tamara said, this is a feature of the Moodle that we can take advantage of. And the 40-item pre-test was used, the same test was used as a post-test. Okay. Okay, next slide, please.
This is the next slide.
Yes, it's you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. So because it was voluntary, a lot of students did not do all of the different steps. And we had asked them to do the pre-test, 4 practice tests and 1 post-test. And the table on the right shows the number of students who took the pre-test and then how many did one practice test, two practice tests, et cetera, and how many took the post-test. And so it was a very messy data set. So we had to decide which students to use for statistical analysis. And we selected 51 students who had full data sets, pre-test, several practice sessions, and a post-test. And there were 51 students who had that data. And there was a large number of students who had a pre-test, and they had several practice tests, but no post-test. And so we decided to make this a set 2 group of students, and we used their final post-test, final practice test in place of the post-test to do the statistical analysis. We conducted 2 ANCOVAs, that's analysis of variance, of covariance, and we used the number of practice sessions as the covariate. So we're trying to match, we have the 2 groups matched as far as ability based upon the pre-test, and we wanted to control for the number of practice sessions. So the person who took 10 practice tests would have more advantage than someone who took 1 practice test. And so by using an ANCOVA rather than an ANOVA, it controls for the different number of practices that people have taken. We did find significant results. It was strongly significant with using all 94 students. That's the set 1 students and set 2 students. And it's a pretty good strong significance with P 0.007 and an effect size of 0.103. And we also did another ANCOVA only using the set 1 students to confirm this. It was also significant, not as strongly significant. It was 0.032 in significance, and the effect size was slightly larger, 0.133. So in both, using both of these sets, the students who did receive the feedback on their incorrect answers improved. And the improvement is only a few points on a 40-point test, but it was a significant improvement and basically across the board. And one of the other things I checked on this was the amount of time that the students took to do the quizzes. These are online quizzes. They're just 2-choice, multiple choice. So it's either A or B. It's either excited or exciting, to fill in the blank there. And the students in both sets, they averaged 5.46 minutes. That's based on the set 1, set 2 students, 498 tests. And the students who didn't, students that we excluded, they took slightly longer. And for all attempts, it was just under 6 minutes. So in fact, if the student took the pre-test and the post-test and did 4 practice sessions, it would be less than 45 minutes. So in less than 45 minutes of instruction, this kind of automated feedback time, students made statistically significant progress if they received the feedback. Now, this feedback is good, but there are 2 big obstacles to the feedback. One obstacle is item generation. It takes a while in Moodle to be able to create the items, and there are ways of shortening that, but it's still a little bit complex. The other thing is you have to figure out the taxonomy. So if you choose some point and you need to provide feedback, what you would like to do is you don't want to have to prepare individual feedback for every item. You would like to have some kind of standard feedback for this type of error. And so if you develop items that have, if there's 3 error types, then you would have 3 basic types of feedback that you would use. And then that makes it easier. You could copy and paste it down in a spreadsheet before you import it into Moodle. And so the taxonomy of error types is something that a lot of teachers haven't thought about. For us, we were looking at this difference between exciting and excited, interesting and interested. And so it was pretty easy. If it's not the ED one, it's the ING one. And so the feedback was easy to generate on that. The second obstacle is actually setting things up in Moodle. If you're not familiar with Moodle, then that can be a hurdle. Tamara, would you like to take over from here?
Yes, and let you monitor the chat. So this
I can't
is
see the chat while I can't see the chat while I'm
go back,
sharing
go
the
back.
screen.
You went forward, go back. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't see the chat. So Tada, if you could monitor the chat, please.
So what I have here is the Moodle feedback option as seen by educators, and where you would enter the information. And if you were going to enter a Moodle test into a question bank and do it as an item by entering it for the test, this is the sort of choices that you would have to set up. So this is a view of what you would have to put in for the correct answer choice in number 1, the incorrect distractor in number 2, and then the feedback to provide. Now, if you're thinking about doing this for 240 times, cutting and pasting or even just directly entering it into the Moodle feedback options or any LMS feedback option is probably more than a teacher would like to do. Next slide, please. So here, this is just the overall feedback that's entered and given to all students. And this was the feedback that was actually provided to our control group students at the end. So you can see that they got some feedback, but it was not as detailed as the item level feedback that the students in the treatment group were receiving. Next. So what we had to do was think about where our grammar points were and have our item generation. So with the passives, we were looking at the correct use of the passive. So they were aggravated, they were aggravating. Past participle, attributive, and predicate forms in the present participle in the same way. So we had to generate items that had the correct answer choice as well as distractor answer choices, and use the taxonomy of errors that we developed in order to create correct item feedback, which we built in Japanese for the students after identifying the particular error type that it was in English. Next. So here is the items that would be generated. So here are passive, past attributive, past predicate, present attributive, and present predicate. Tripping over my tongue. Items, and the choices on the left side of the screen and the feedback that was provided on the right side of the screen. And the feedback became generically developed this way. Yes, Brad?
Yes, I was going to point out something, but that's okay. We'll move on.
Okay. And then this is the view of the items after they're uploaded to Moodle. And so there's the 240 item bank where we have, this is only the passes that you see here on the screen in this particular screenshot. But it's how it would look to the teacher when they were finished with their upload into the question format. Next slide. Here you see 2 other views with the past participle and the present participle forms. Next.
Yes, I wanted to point out that
Yeah.
because some of these verbs were difficult for students, we also put in the translation in there. So what aggravate meant and what alarm meant. So we added those to make it easier for students because we didn't want the vocabulary to be the main reason why they got an item incorrect.
Now, this is what we actually created after we developed our items. This is a concatenated items in the spreadsheet that we use for Moodle import formatting. And this is important because rather than entering every item one by one, we created a spreadsheet in which we had our grammatical point, the stem and lead in, the stem follow-up, the distractor, the correct answer, the feedback, all in separate columns, which could then be concatenated which is a function in any spreadsheet, in order to create a file that could then be transferred into a text file and uploaded. We have 5 minutes. Next slide.
Okay, could I just jump in here? The spreadsheet, I don't think we took a screenshot of the spreadsheet. It looks a lot cleaner. And so there's a formula in one column, and the formula just brings together all the information. So one column has just the correct answer, one column has the incorrect answer, one column has what comes before it, one column has what comes after it.
Yeah, we weren't going to talk about that.
Yes.
So, so this is the question bank of views that you get in both of them. So you upload the ones with treatment, they had the response, and the ones without the item feedback is the control group. Next. These are the student views for the feedback provided to the control group. Next. Here's the views of the feedback as provided to the treatment group. And you can see here that when there's an incorrect answer, they get the feedback, and when they get it correct, they just got a good. Next. So
Okay.
here are our conclusions.
So the conclusions are very simple. Basically, the use of this item level feedback on incorrect answers actually helped the students learn. And this is really important because we didn't check how much time the students looked at the answers. So after they submit one of the tests, then they can check and they can do the review. And we don't think that the students spent much time on review, but even the limited amount of time that they did showed that they improved their English. And the time burden was very short. As you could see, each test only took 5 or 6 minutes for the students to do. And the preparation takes a lot of time. And we'll actually, at a different conference, we're going to be giving a presentation on the nuts and bolts of how to make the spreadsheet and how to import things into Moodle. But that will be later on in the next year. Okay, I think that's all. We do have references, and we'll be glad to share this PowerPoint with people if you're interested. Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I will ask a question. Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and I'm impressed by what you did. It looks like you chose for the settings of the quiz, what is it, feedback towards the end. I can't remember what it says, Moodle. Did you consider having feedback while the students take the quiz, such that they click the check button and they can see right or wrong after each item rather than all at the end?
No, that's because there were several different teachers in several different circumstances that were doing this. So we just wanted to make it straight. And we also made it so that the students in the treatment group, after the test was closed, could no longer look at the answers. So we wanted to try to control them so they wouldn't, study a lot more. And so, yeah, no, that would be a good option to use sometime. It's just we didn't do it this time.
We were trying, yeah, thank you, Rob. It was a great question. But yeah, we were trying to keep very strict controls on this to actually see if the treatment did have an effect. I would expect if they were provided immediate feedback, we would see a much stronger effect going forward. But trying to think about it in terms of how most teachers might use it, as well as in the setup of the test, because rather than having each item appear on a new page, we had all 40 items appear at once. So they just had to click through all of them. So.
Right. Okay, let me just ask, while I've got your attention, you said the 40 items for each of the quizzes were drawn randomly.
Yes.
I'm guessing that perhaps they were drawn randomly from different subsections of questions.
Yes, there were 5 categories that we made. The 2 positions, attributive and predicate, and the past present participle, and the passive, which also appears the same as past participle.
I see. So presumably it had about 8 items.
Yeah, in the same ratio as the generated. So slide One of the slides has that data on it.
Yeah, we had 10, 10, 10, 5, 5, basically.
Yeah, the
The
predicate positions were 5 each, and the passive and the attributive were 10 each.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, it looks like the time is up, but I put in the chat a link for if you want to continue the discussion. You can click on that link and it will take you to where you can choose room 12. We are room 12.
Room 12, okay.
Yeah.
12.
So thank you very much for your presentation today, Dr. Swenson and Brad and myself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all for coming.
I would like
Okay.
to ask you a couple of questions if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, I will be going to room 12.
Okay.
Okay.
So I will
And
see
I will
you
as well.
there.
Okay.
Okay.
See you there.
Okay, see you
Okay,
there.
thank you.
Thank you.